Thank you, gentlemen. We were supposed to have 1 hour for our discussion, and now I am told we are going to only have 35 minutes. So we have to do what we can with the time available. Maybe the most important question I should ask all of you is what, in your view, are the biggest constraints to doing business in Africa? I mean, in the light of the vision that was outlined by the chairperson of the African Union Commission this morning, that question is very, very important. What is going to be happening towards the realization of that vision? Maybe if I ask to start with you, Charles Mbire, for your perspective, from your perspective and experience in Uganda as an investor, what is in fact the biggest constraint in doing business in Uganda, but also in Africa from your experience, but all of you?
I think from my experience, the biggest constraint has always been capital, political stability, and an inherited curriculum which was modeled for white-collar jobs, not practical, productive jobs in Africa. So those are three hindrances for doing business in Africa. The third one is the business in Africa is usually done by the informal sector. It is very hard, they say, in order to progress something, you must be able to measure it. So informal sector is very hard to measure. It's very hard to make business plans around the informal sector in Africa. So business models which are made outside Africa and you try to transplant them in Africa usually fail. The best models are those which are made in Africa for Africa. That's what I think. Those are the hindrances that I think stop business progression in Africa.
Thank you very much, my brother. Mo?
Well, I think maybe the most important thing for us, for Africa, is really to create the single market in Africa. People need to appreciate that in this world, we cannot really compete as 54 small countries. There's no way. The only difference between us and China is 1.3 billion people, or 1 billion people. Imagine if China was 54 little countries, where China would have been today. Just think about that. Today you are in Europe. The most important achievement of Europe is a single market. You know, goods travel from Scotland to Frankfurt to Warsaw, it just doesn't stop. And that creates scale. That's important. While in Africa, unfortunately, we have all these severe borders. We don't allow people, goods, or capital to cross our boundaries. It's difficult. I know some regions are making some progress, but the political will is lacking, frankly. There's no really strong political will and commitment to this integration of Africa. Our trade between ourselves is 12 or 13%. This is a ridiculous number. And that something has to change. And it's something in our hand. We cannot blame the colonials or cannot blame the slave traders or whatever sad part of our history. This is something in our own hands and we need to do. The problem is still we're afraid of each other. We play games with all that kind of stuff. We need really this. Don't you feel, I mean, every time I travel in Africa, I really feel bad because I have to travel with my British passport. You know why? Because if I travel with my African passport, I'm going to have deep trouble. I'm going to need 1 month to get a visa. Yes, I'm going to be harassed. But I bring my British passport and please, sir, we are welcome. Aren't you ashamed of yourselves? Really? So for me, this is something really extremely important. second most important thing for us really is the skill gap for our young people. We have huge number of young people. Half of our population are 19 years old. And this can be an amazing, as the chairperson was saying this morning, is an amazing opportunity. But I'm afraid we are wasting that opportunity. Why? Because we are not offering our young people the skills needed for work. I give you numbers. I believe in numbers. I'm an engineer. 27% of our university graduates studied humanities. 27%. 2% study agriculture. You guys are crazy? Will Shakespeare and Molière build bridges in Africa? Build roads in Africa? Who's going to do that? Agriculture, 70% of our people depend on agriculture, and only 2% of our graduates are studying agriculture. This huge disconnect between our education system and our young people is really serious. We're spending all this money on education, but we're producing kids who really cannot work. When's the last time our education people spoke with business people to ask where the jobs are coming from next? I think, for me, I can have few, but these are two crucial issues, really, we need to pay attention to.
Thank you very much, Dr. Valentine.
Thank you.
What are the constraints to investment in our countries?
Thank you very much, President. The constraints, as I see them, from the perspective of Rwanda and from the perspective of the East African community in general, it's really many. I agree with Mo. The size of the market, the tiny markets. Our countries are just too small to really be attractive enough in terms of investment. So we need to just grow the size of the market, and the way of doing that is exactly what Mo said. It's really about accelerating this integration, making it happen. It's happening faster in few places than others. A second constraint has to do with the cost of doing business. It's still too costly. To do business in our countries. It's too costly, the energy is too costly, but also the transport. Just importing and exporting a container, we get around $3,000 between $3,000 and $3,050 just to importing and exporting a container from East Africa. If you compare with East Asia, you compare with the most competitive country, Singapore, it simply doesn't compare. So there again, it calls to investment, huge investment in transport, huge investment in again, making it just much more competitive from that point of view. A third element also, which was mentioned by both Bire and Mo, has to do with the skills. The skills, just not having the skills, the skill set that we need. And I will say a fourth element, it's still the unpredictable environment, regulatory environment. We really need, it changes too fast, it changes too often in a number of countries. You will have today the tax is this one. It will change in 8 months' time. So these changes don't allow necessarily to make a long plan in terms of investment. So I will stop there. But in my view, those are 4 important constraints, and I guess we'll get the opportunity to say what is being done about those 4 important constraints.
Thank you very much. Meanwhile, the audience, you should be getting ready to ask questions because we're going to truncate our discussion. Sir Andrew, as a private foreign investor from the EU, what is your perception of the constraints to investment in Africa?
Thanks, Festus. I'm not going to repeat those because I'd agree with those. They're all facts. Personally, I think the fragmentation is probably one of the master controlling issues, and if that were a little bit resolved, that would open up or resolve many of the other issues naturally, or would begin to. I want to just focus on one other aspect, which isn't really a problem in Africa. It's a problem of people outside of Africa. Potential investors have too short a time horizon for investment returns for Africa. And if there was a greater synchronization between the understanding of what the investment return horizon was with what can be achieved, I think we would get more investment going. Too often people look for a very quick return in an environment which obviously requires quite sustained fundamental economic development in the 4 areas that have just been touched on alone. Those things don't happen in 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years. They take a long time. But if you believe that they will happen, as I do and my company does, then you can start to decide to make commitments which over the long run make much more sense. And I think part of the issue in Africa is to make sure that potential ex-Africa investors are educated on what a sensible time horizon for returns really looks like, instead of trying to do short-run investments which inevitably run into long-run rigidities.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to my second question, and then I will not ask my third question because that's going to come from the audience. So get ready. But beginning with you, Mo Ibrahim, through your work through the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and the prize and the index of African governance, you are kind of obsessed with transparent, accountable governance. What improvements you think that what you are doing is having on the quality of African governance? And what is the relevance of accountable governance to investment in Africa?
I think all good things.
But of course, I'm going to, that same question, all of you should answer it too. But start with.
I think all good things comes out of good governance. Take sustainable economic development. And I say sustainable because that's important when you say development. That is one of the 4 pillars of the index. The index measures governance in Africa. We measure 93 parameters. The sustainable economic development have, I think, about 30 of these parameters. We measure the household, is management of public finances, the infrastructure. We measure exactly what's happening in infrastructures, in communications, in roads, in digital access, etc. So actually, economic development is a corner of that and can only really be achieved if we are able to manage all these large parameters. You need rule of law. If there is no rule of law in your country, how do you expect people to come invest in your country? You cannot have a civilized society, let alone investable society, if you don't have rule of law. Rule of law is important. You need to have transparency. That's important. Human development, because you need to have a skilled workforce, etc. These are the things which you are trying to measure, and these are all really the basis of a healthy society which attracts investors. So the correlation is there. It's part and parcel of good governance.
Dr. Valentine, do you agree with Mo?
I will say that good governance for us cannot remain in a kind of very abstract indicators. We bring it to very concrete indicators. When it comes to good governance, we look at very specific, we apply them to business, and we look at very specific indicators. What is it that the business is interested about? And we target the SMEs mainly. Well, they're interested in how long it will get them to get access to electricity. They're interested in how long it will get them to register a property. Not only how long, but how costly will that be. They're interested in knowing exactly how long and how costly it will be to get their goods or services across borders. So we bring that in a very specific manner. My only concern sometimes with a number of indexes is that they remain very much global, very much in the abstract. And we bring that to specifics. And it is by being so targeted and so specific that we've been able to improve the business environment in the way we did. We've been able to move basically to just cut down the number of days, but also the cost, the number of procedures it used to take to register a property. We have cut down the number of days it used to take to just file taxes. So and again, because this is going online, and because it has become online, it is so transparent. We have also, so very systematically, but also in a very targeted manner. Sometimes I do have a problem with the fact that we speak a lot of good governance, transparencies, but it still remains something that is very abstract.
Thank you. Andrew?
I'm going to answer it in a slightly different way. We've made an announcement this morning that we're committed to building 5 new factories in Africa in the next 5 years in 5 different countries.
Yes, I was going to come to that, but it doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so I just, as I think about that, there are 2 things that I really count on, both of which I think are improving in Africa. One is, if I build those factories, they may take 2 or 3 years to build, and I would expect them to be operational for 50 years. So the first thing I look for is long-term predictability and transparency of government policy. Because if that changes all the time, it's a huge problem. And the second is, inside those factories, I need workers who every day follow the rules. So I need a society which celebrates and rewards compliant behavior. And so if you think about Singapore, why is Singapore the world's great process capital of the world? It's because they have long-term predictable government policy, and they have a population who are proud to be process engineers who follow the rules and the process. I believe that we're seeing in a number of countries in Africa the time is right to engage in this type of activity. It's not without risk, but those are the 2 things we look for: long-term predictable government policy and a culture which encourages and rewards teamwork in individual working, which is supportive of the process.
Thank you. I have to stand up. I was approached and told that we tend to look just here. Anybody there? Yes, you. This gentleman here. And then I'll come to the middle. Please.
Thank you very much, panel. My name is Chris Miunda. I am Chief Technical Advisor for the Pan-African Agribusiness and Agro-Industry Consortium. My question to Mo is, thank you very much for your observation in terms of the rather upside-down skill set we have on the continent with regard to our natural resources. Only 2% go into agribusiness. Others go into other things. I would like to find out, in terms of your work, we know a little bit of your work, and we know a lot about the prize, which gives a lot of money to old politicians. We would like to find out if in your work there is space and scope to assist in terms of training young entrepreneurs, particularly those in agribusiness enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you answer more, the lady, please. Here in the middle. Then it's going to be somebody there.
Thank you. I am Dr. Asfour. I am chair for the COMESA Business Council and the president for African Alliance for Women Empowerment. And Egypt, I am the president for Business and Professional Women. Thank you very much for the presenters. I think you put your point on the real issue of enabling environment, which I call them the triad of investment. They are the 3 pillars. First pillar is the population, the people, which Mo Ibrahim said about it, investment in human resources, how they could be educated, how they could be relevant to the needs of our African continent, how we build their capacity. And the second pillar, the second P, is the policy and the procedures. What do our African leaders put in order to make enabling environment for investment, to have free movement for people and goods across Africa, to put together education system, to put transport and infrastructure? It's all about the policies and the procedures to implement the policies, because we have a lot of policies on paper, but the implementation are the real thing which we are really misleading, not really implementing it. And the third pillar, is the product. What product do we have in Africa for investment? We have a lot of raw materials, as Chairperson Zuma said. How can we add value to our product to be competitive, to be a standard with international standard, and to be of good quality? The three pillars of the empowerment and investing is very important. And here within the 5th AU Africa Business Forum, I'm asking the panelists, how can we have this collaboration between Africa and Europe with reference to the three pillars regarding our population and their training of youth and women, and with reference to policy and the product good quality to have value added in Africa? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As a senior government official, I thought you were going to answer some of the questions you asked. This one here. That, please, yes. Please.
My name is Bob Schinga. I'm Minister of Agriculture, outgoing and incoming Commerce, Trade and Industry for Zambia.
Thank you.
My point goes to Mr. Whitty. Mr. Whitty, you've talked about the issue of predictability on policy and the issues of how you can achieve that return on your investment in the long term. How do you think we should get the business side also to take the same long-term view? Because it goes both ways. So let's see whether you can share your experiences on the decisions that you've taken on the 5 countries where you're going to invest and what influenced you, and whether the long-term return on investment is going to be commensurate with those objectives. I thank you.
Thank you. There has been questions to Mo and to Mr. Whitty. Dr. Valentine and Mr. Bire has not been asked questions. Okay, the lady here. The lady behind you, sir. I'm a ladies' man. The lady here.
Allô? Voilà, je reviens vers vous parce que M. Mo Ibrahima a encore posé le problème.
Please, I don't have translation. You have to ask in English.
My English is bad.
Speak Arabic then.
You told about the common market. The common market. The African Union, when it is created, they tell that they improve the common market. Now, African Union has 10 years where the common market is not great. It is voluntary of state, the president, or if the private sector can do plaidoyer to have the common market, how to do this by the private sector? My question.
Thank you. Thank you. One more question to Mr. Mbire. That side. Okay, one of you gentlemen. The one who will get the mic first. That will be his luck.
Sorry.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you so much.
Please.
My name is Hervé. I'm a young entrepreneur from Rwanda. My question, I want to ask you are talking about protection of some intellectual properties from property, but I want to ask the task or what EU and Africa Business Forum will do to promote those intellectual property for the younger entrepreneurs to implement it in Africa and across the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I thought some of the questions we would answer ourselves as leaders. Mo, the first question was to you.
Right. I think the first and the third question, the lady also. Very quickly.
Yeah, first and second, yes.
Right. Very quickly. First, we don't give prizes to politicians. We give prizes to leaders. The leaders who came, did the right thing for the continent, for their people, and moved it forward. Because that is important. The reputation in Africa outside is very bad. You ask any European or American about African leaders, They will tell you Mobutu, Idi Amin, they all know those guys. The only good guy they know is Mandela because of the legacy of Mandela, but you don't know anybody else. Actually, many of you don't know Festus Mogae. President Mogae is one of our laureates. But many of you, how many of you know President Bereas? You heard about President Bereas of Cape Verde? Shame on you. Yeah, because you follow the Western media and you only know about, look, I always say to the Europeans, if as an African I come to Europe and say, actually, I only know Hitler, Mussolini, Milosevic, Putin, yeah, how would you feel? So it's important to find the African leaders who brought their people out of poverty, took them from the least developed countries category to the medium income countries, who observed democracy, human rights, etc., and left on time, did not turn the country as like their own farm, That is important. So we need to bring these people aboard, and then we need to keep them working in civil society. You can ask, and I was complaining to President Mogae that they don't really publicize what they're doing because they are running all over the place, fighting on the issue of climate change, peace in Africa, the mediating between the problems, etc. They're taking issue about women, girls in school education, etc. These are the kind of leaders we need for Africa to honor, and we need our kids to look up to those guys. You say, I want to be like this gentleman. That is important. So that's what we do about leader. As for young people, look, there is limit. Our foundation doesn't accept grants from anybody because the work we're doing is very political. And we don't want somebody in Africa to say, oh, you are agents of the British government. You are a colonial thing. Americans are funding you. No, we are an African voice. And for an African voice, our fund must come from us, African people. So it's an African money made in Africa, and that's it. That, of course, limits what you can do. The index is the most important thing. It costs a lot of money. No continent on earth produces the index. No continent look at self so critically as we do, and we produce this important document. Then the prize, we do few things. I mean, we have a number of high-level scholarship. We target the top talent in Africa. We have a full MBA in London Business School, a full grant. We already graduated 7 very senior people. And those guys doing very important work. Some of them in Africa, some of them in Goldman Sachs or somewhere there. But wherever they are, is Africa they care about and they understand what Africa is. We have a number of high-level internship. I mean, you used to have one every year in World Trade Organization. Valentine was deputy of Pascal Lamy, and Pascal was training one African person every year. And so we had 3 women who graduated from there. We have people working with Kabruka. So we do a number of these sort of things. We have some people working on SAWAS. We have 7 people who did PhD in the area of development, the relation between rule of law and development and good governance, that triangle. So we are helping with, but it is a limited amount of because that's what we can do. Now, the second question was about what business people need to do about integration. A few days ago, there is a business people conference in Geneva. It was the Jeune Afrique CEOs conference. I think they had 400 chief executives from Africa in Geneva. And I made a proposal, and Donald Kabruka committed the African government to really execute it, because I had to go at those business people, and I said, your voice is very, very faint. You guys don't speak up. Regional integration is an interest of your businesses, but none of you is lobbying their government or raising their voice to say, we need that for our business. Somehow you are afraid of your presidents, You think that if you raise your voice, people will say you're getting into politics? No. This is an important, and actually your president signed up for integration because everybody signed up for integration. So you are not being dissidents. You are not. So they agreed to try to form an association for African business people and to try to go